Okay, welcome to part 9 of the Fragger tutorial, but for me it's more like part 26, the number of times this has messed up. Okay, so here we go. We're going to create a bullet. Okay, we're not going to worry about any collisions or anything like that, we're just going to actually create the bullets and get them moving. Okay, the bullet graphic has been, you don't need to look at this, but it's this little white blob that looks like a bullet. It's white so that we can colour it like we do with a tank. Okay. Right, the first thing that we need to set up are a couple of values to control how fast the bullet is and how long it stays on screen for. Okay, so in tank.cs I've gone near the top where we've got all our other values. Here's my speed information for the tank, and I'm going to create a public float called bullet speed, and I'm going to set that to 240 pixels per second. I'm going to create another public float, and this is going to be bullet time. So this is how long, oh, let's call it time to live. Like the IP header, if you can remember that. I'm going to put that at 4 seconds. Okay, right. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new class now to create the bullet. So we're going to go up to project, add class, and we're going to call this bullet. It might take a little bit longer for yours to load up, but I've done it so many times today. Right, and we're going to call this bullet. Okay, so it creates a class for us. Then we're going to create a constructor for this. Remember, the constructor is just a special subroutine which has the same name as the class. So we say public bullet. Right, when we shoot a bullet, we're going to want to know what tank shot it. So we're going to have a parameter here, and we're going to say tank player, so we can keep track of what player created the tank. Because we're going to be creating a sprite, we need to include at the top a reference to our our engine, so engine 7. Okay, right, so let's create our bullet sprite and then we'll populate it with some information. So we're going to say sprite s, okay, equals gm.enginemanager.add sprite. Right, that is going to create a local variable. Okay, so when this bullet subroutine has ended, we won't be able to access it again. But for a bullet, we don't need to do any like manual key movements or anything like that, like we do with a tank. With a tank, we've got to move the tank about with player input. But a bullet, once you set it off, the game engine and our code can mess about with that easily. Okay, so we just create a local one for this. We're now going to define the frame, and the frame as ever uses the base texture that we've got where all our graphics are. They don't have to be, you can have more than one texture when you're doing these things. And the rectangle for it is, so new rectangle, oops, can't spell rectangle. New rectangle, it's at X position 12, Y position 170, width 8 and height 10. Now, it's moaning that it doesn't know what a rectangle is. Now, a rectangle is in the Microsoft XNA framework library, so we need to create another reference to say that we're using that library, xna.framework, and then it'll be happy. There you go, rectangle's gone blue. Okay, right. The next thing we want to do is we want to set the X position and the Y position of the bullet. Now we want the bullet to be at the center of the tank. So wherever the tank is, that's where we want the bullet to originate. So we've given the bullet information about the player that shot it, so we can use that. So player.tank.center X. So what's the X center of the tank? And set the Y in exactly the same way. So player.tank player.center.y. Okay. We also want to set the color of the tank. So the wash is going to be the same as player.color because we stored that, remember. Okay. We're also going to want to store long term for the bullet a reference to the player, and we do that by saying s.associations.add player. Now once we start doing the collision detection, we're not going to want our own bullets to blow up our own tank, even though in reality our own bullets could blow up our own tank. Games aren't about reality. Okay, reality is actually quite boring, so it's better to make a game how we want it to be rather than trying to mimic reality. What a shame some games creators can't see that, but hey. Okay, so we're going to do that. The other thing we need to do is we want the bullet to start travelling in the direction that the tank is facing. So the easiest way to do that is to rotate the bullet to the same angle as the player's tank. Oops, I'm being an idiot here. Player.tank.rotation angle. So we'd look that up and store the same one in our bullet sprite. We're then going to use the rotation helper to set the bullet off in the direction we've now set it facing. So it wants to know what sprite, well, it's S, and the speed is player.bullet speed. We just created that, remember? And just put 0 for the last bit. Okay. The other thing we're going to want to do, eventually we're going to set up in the next video bouncing for this bullet, so it's going to bounce off bouncy walls. Okay, so what we're also going to do, we're going to say s.onUpdate equals face direction. We're going to get the game engine, when it updates the position of the bullet, to run a subroutine that we're creating, okay, called face direction. So we're going to just create this here underneath the bullet subroutine, so make sure you're outside. We're just going to say private void face direction sprite bullet as a parameter. Okay, so what happens when the engine updates this sprite? It looks at this value and says, oh, are there any update routines that the programmer wants me to run? If we set one, it goes, oh, yes there is. It's called face direction. I'm going to run that for them, and I'm going to give them access to the sprite that I'm updating, in this case our bullet. So this allows us to manipulate our bullet. So this is where you'd put artificial intelligence code and things like that. So if you had a homing bullet, which we might have in a future video, that's what we'd put to set up our code. Okay, so in here we're going to use a rotation helper again, and we're just going to say face movement. So it says what sprite we're messing about with, and we say, well, it's the bullet. What direction? Well, for our game we want it to be exactly the angle it's moving at. So we say direction accuracy.free. We're not bothered about three-dimensional rotation, and we put 0 at the end. So the last two just put false and comma naught. Okay, right, that's everything we need to shoot a bullet. The last thing we've got to do is we want to kill the bullet after a certain amount of time. So back in our bullet code, we're going to say s.timer initialize. So we need the timer system for a sprite. So once we've initialized it, we're going to say s.timer.kill after and player.bullet time to live. Okay, so that value that we set in tank, which I set to 4 seconds, after 4 seconds the bullets will get destroyed. So that creates the bullet. We now need some means of shooting it. Now in our tank, if we go back to tank now, we created keys to shoot. Okay, that was the default key. Remember in a previous video we've overwritten these to whatever your settings were. Okay, so let's look for our, so we're in tank, let's use the little picker to find the input code. Check input. There we go. Let's jump back down to it. Right, we had key settings for left, right, forward and reverse. So we're just going to add our final key setting, gm.inputmanager.key down fire, so the fire button or fire key, and we're going to say when we do that, new bullet, not a buffer, dear, new bullet, and it wants to know what the tank is. Now we're in the code for the tank, alright, and to refer to the tank that we're dealing with, we use the keyword this. So that will give the bullet a reference to our tank. Okay, now this key check was key down, so if we hold the key down it will generate a bullet. And remember, these keys are checked 100 times a second, so let's just see what happens. I'm going to run it and then we'll do a quick review and we'll sort out the key pressing, and that'll be the end of this video. Okay, so I'm going to put that on screen. See, I'm holding the key down and I get a constant line of bullets. If I rotate my tank, I get like a laser beam effect. Well, not a laser beam, I get like a water hose effect. So I can make some really awesome patterns of bullets, but that, we don't want that. Okay, so I'm going to go to my check input code and I'm going to get rid of key down and I'm going to put key pressed. Okay, so I've got gm.inputmanager.key pressed fire. Let's run it again and see what we get. So press 1, hold down my button, it shoots 1, so I have to keep, you can probably hear me pressing it. That's as fast as I can press it without breaking the keyboard to pieces. Okay, so if I was to try and shoot the yellow tank, it actually, the bullets don't get to the yellow tank, which is quite funny. Okay, right, that's the end of this video. Let's just recap what we've done. We added input code to check for when we press our fire button and we create a new bullet. We added a couple of values that we made public so we could access them outside of the tank. Bullet speed, which is how fast we want it to move, and time to live, which is how long we want it to live. We created a new class called bullet, and it doesn't do much at the minute. It generates a sprite for us at the position of the tank it was given, using the colour of the tank it was given. It stores a reference to the tank that shot it. It sets the bullet moving in the angle that the player was, and it does a rotation routine to make sure it's always facing the right way, and this is the bit that kills it after 4 seconds. Okay, let me just run it again with all 4 tanks just to prove that they all shoot and they all shoot the right colour bullet. Right, so oops, I've pressed the wrong key. Right, there you go, 4 tanks on. Let me put it into game mode. There's the red one shooting. Oops, I've messed the keys up for my blue one. The blue one shooting, I think, was that one. There's the blue one, so there's the blue and the red bullets going at once. The yellow one was that, so let's just rotate him. Oh, no, that's the green tank. Go. Green, right control line for that one. The yellow tank, there's the yellow tank. Okay, so if I try and do 4 bullets once, you can see there's our code and it's generating all those bullets. Oh, it's making a pretty pattern. Okay, and you can see that the bullets die. Some bullets are going off screen, but they'll all die after 4 seconds. Okay, right, in the next video we'll do some collision detection so that we can hit these absorbing walls, the black ones. We can destroy these brown ones because they were the soft wall, and the red ones are the rebounding walls, so we want to bounce off that. Okay.